Well, hey, we're going to turn a bit right now. I have an interview with Victoria Bogner. Vicky's been on the program, two or three times over the last couple of years
Yeah,
or
at
whatever.
least.
She joined us. And as we've talked about this program, both Pat and myself, we've been financial advisors for decades. We started an independent firm 30-some years ago called Hanson McLean for most of its existence. We rebranded that, I don't know, 5-6 years ago to Allworth. And then we've grown in part from, clients get referred in by their existing clients, et cetera. But we've also grown quite a bit by other firms partnering with us. And you're seeing this across the independent wealth management industry, mainly because these larger firms can offer a lot more services to clients than little mom and pop shops.
Yes.
Right?
So like when we came up with this concept years ago and we started adding other firms, we went outside capital and got some outside capital, but we've added tax services and estate planning services since,
insurance
analysis and more
Medicare
high net worth
planning.
and Medicaid. So all these things that are actually the clients need, but unless you get enough advisors and clients to spread them out.
But then we've also discovered the best advisors don't want to come work for somebody. They already have something good going on in their life, right? So when they partner with us, it's a way that we've been able to attract some of the best talent in the country, frankly. You get phenomenal people like Vicky Bogner.
Yeah, and then Vicky gets the fact that she gets a lot of autonomy, but doesn't have to run a small business on a day-to-day basis.
And spends time doing things that she's add the most value to clients. So
that's our thesis anyway, and it seems
proven
to be
out with
working.
Vicky. Vicky,
Yes.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, and you're spot on. I was CEO of my prior firm, and I love working in the business, not so much on the business as far as doing all of the day-to-day stuff of running a small business. You're spot on.
Yeah, what are your
it has been one of the best decisions.
What educational designations do you have?
I'm a certified financial planner, a chartered financial analyst, and an accredited investment fiduciary.
Okay, so
bunch more than I have.
Is that right?
A lot more initials behind your name.
Alphabet soup.
I actually had one that I dropped. I didn't feel like paying the $100 a year. I'm like, how many do I need?
When it starts running off the edge of your business card, you need to pare it down.
Yeah, and so you are the head of wealth planning at Allworth.
That's right. Yes, so I get to use my skill set to help all of our clients here at Allworth, especially our high net worth clients. And we're getting more and more folks who are realizing that this is the place to be if you have assets over $5 million.
So you're going to tell us about someone that you recently worked with and some strategy planning. So please share with us.
Exactly. What's great about Allworth is, as you mentioned, we have estate planning, tax planning, insurance planning in-house, which means that when you're working with an advisor, you're actually working with a team of people who are on staff here and looking at your complete situation and working in tandem toward what is in your best interest. So
are you head of wealth planning, or you're on the marketing team? Where are you from? You sound like you're able to get a pitch.
How much I believe in Allworth's value proposition. Yeah. So these clients, I'll call them John and Rebecca, but these are clients of mine that this is a very common situation. It was their second marriage, and they each had grown children from their prior marriages. Rebecca had one grown child, and John had two. So the very common issue is, how do I make sure that my spouse is taken care of, but ultimately I want my assets to pass to my kids, not necessarily my spouse's kids from the prior marriage, right?
Yeah. Well, and I tell you, Vicky, I know you've seen this because we've seen it. People sometimes they get unintentionally disinherited.
Yes.
Yes.
Or thrown out of a house.
Right. It's an issue, and you can have a lot of handshake understandings, but really you want to get it down in your estate plan exactly what you want to have happen with those assets. And these folks, their estate was about $8 million, which right now isn't bumping up against that estate tax exemption. But if that gets slashed in half at the end of this year, then they will. So it's another consideration. So if you're listening right now and you're in a second marriage and you have kids from prior marriages, listen up. This is important for you to know. A common way for you to make sure that your assets ultimately go where you want them to is to use, and by the way, let me preface this by saying I'm not offering legal advice here. You need to consult an estate attorney. We have estate specialists here on staff. But part of my job as a financial planner is to give you advice in accordance with your total plan. So commonly, people in this situation will use separate revocable trusts. So they each set up a revocable trust, and then that would feed into what's called a bypass trust or a QTIP trust or a combination of both. And I know we're getting a little bit into a complex area, but I want you to hear this because this is why it's so important to have a financial planner involved in this, because each kind of trust has different tax implications. So, for instance, a bypass trust, how that works is as the spouse with your assets, you get to say, okay, if I die first, then my spouse gets to use this amount of assets during their lifetime, but when they die, what's left in my bucket goes to my kids, my grandkids, whoever you want, right?
And Vicki, this applies not just to second marriages, right? Because it could be a first marriage is where husband and wife both, they have different ideas of where they'd like to see their assets go up when they pass.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is used in a lot of use cases. This is just the most common. But what happens with a bypass trust is that first, those assets are completely removed from the surviving spouse's estate, right? So when that first spouse dies, it goes into this trust. It is not a part of that surviving spouse's estate. So what that means is if those assets grow to be $30 million, when that second spouse dies, it's not a part of their estate. There's no estate tax on those assets. So that's huge if you have a portfolio that's above the estate tax exemption limit, and it's going to grow in value over time rapidly.
But it
but
does
also
not.
That means.
But I'm sorry, Vicki. But it doesn't receive a step up in basis once it's.
I was just going to say that,
okay.
But it doesn't get a step up in basis at that second spouse's death. So in general, it makes sense to put perhaps qualified assets in there, qualified high growth assets, because those qualified assets in an IRA or something like that aren't going to get a step up in basis anyway.
Qualified meaning IRAs,
So,
401ks.
Correct. Yes. Or even Roth assets, right? So that's how to benefit from a bypass trust, but also a QTIP, and that stands for Qualified Terminable Interest Property. We call it QTIP for short. That doesn't remove assets from the second spouse's estate. It does defer the estate taxes, but it keeps it in that second spouse's estate because then it does come with a step up in cost basis at the second spouse's death. So it might make sense to put taxable accounts or real estate into that kind of trust.
And especially if would a QTIP work if you second marriage, right? I bring the house into the marriage. One person brings the house in the marriage, allows the surviving spouse to live in that house until death, in which case it then passes on to the first spouse's descendants.
Correct, or whoever they wanted to leave it to, or might even be a portfolio of investment properties, or a plethora of different things. But what's most important is that when you're working with an estate attorney, it's not common, maybe they're superstars, but it's not common that they would know the tax implications behind all of these decisions. That's why you need your financial planner on that team. And with the right estate plan in place, the decision of what assets flow through to which kind of trust can be made at the time of the first spouse's death, because, of course, the right answer depends on the laws at that time, your asset levels, the estate tax exemption amount at that time. So having a financial advisor with the knowledge of your entire financial plan, your goals, your legacy wishes, incredibly important to make sure that what you want to have happen actually happens.
And so with your clients, your real life clients that you changed to John and Stacy or John, whatever.
John and Rebecca.
John and Rebecca. What did you end up doing? What was the plan with these two?
With these two, we met with an estate attorney who also happens to be a good friend of mine, did my estate plan. But we set up revocable trusts for each of them, and then we also set up bypass and QTIP trusts for each of them, so that when one of them passes away, at that time we can decide, okay, what makes the most sense for which assets to go where, depending on the estate tax exemption at that time, where taxes are, and what the income needs are. So it's all set up. It's all in place. They have a little bit more of a complicated situation because John, one of his kids, is a spendthrift. So we have some provisions in there for that. And then if they have grandkids, we have provisions in there so that they're not subject to the generation skipping tax, which is a whole other thing. So just even more reason to have a financial advisor who's knowledgeable in these things involved in these conversations.
So how many, so of these, so it sounds like you set up 6 trusts, 3 each.
That's right.
3 each. But did you only fund one of them?
We only funded the revocable trust.
So you
for
funded
now,
2,
because,
one for each.
Correct.
So you've got 3 trusts for each.
And by funding just means you put the assets in.
You put the assets in.
Yes.
Title.
So
Correct.
how do we know that at the first death that the decedent's wishes are followed?
That's right. John dies.
John dies. How do we know Rebecca is going to actually fund those?
Because in the language of the revocable trust, which becomes irrevocable at a spouse's death, inside of that trust, number one, it names me as the financial planner over those assets, which means that I can be of help to Rebecca or John, whoever passes away first.
Okay.
But inside that trust, it has the language that these assets need to go into either the bypass, the QTIP, or a combination of both, as per the recommendation of the estate attorney and the financial advisor, which is myself. So there's no way that Rebecca or John could go in there and say, you know what, I'm just going to pull these out and use it for myself.
And who would?
It's very clear language in there.
So okay, so let's think about this, right? So John dies. Rebecca says, "Nah, I don't want to use that." What is it? The beneficiaries that would actually bring action against Rebecca?
If Rebecca actually did that, she would be going. I don't know how she would even do that because she wouldn't have access to the trust.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Because it's an
legal
irrevocable
right.
trust at that point, and then you have to distribute those assets according to the trust, right?
Got it. And you would just go.
So
I remember a situation. This is probably 25 years ago. Second marriage. He dies relatively young. Had a will. Most of his assets. I'm trying to remember exactly. They had the house. Most of his assets were in an IRA rollover. He had a will that he wanted this kid's. I think it was his grandkids' education to be funded at X dollars, but never created any legal documents to structure this. So at his death, there was no irrevocable trust set up, and his ex-wife, I watched over the next decade.
Spend down the money?
Yeah.
Oh no.
So,
and that's why it's so important to have
her half she didn't touch,
revocable trust.
kept letting it grow and grow and grow,
Right.
and his half she kept spending down
Because there weren't enough restrictions.
She didn't like his kids,
and there weren't any restrictions
No.
on the irrevocable.
and I remember thinking this is not really cool, but
There's nothing.
there's nothing I
There's
could
nothing.
do.
Yeah, that's why you have to
I
set
had
up
to- I mean,
separate
that's-
revocable
So
trust.
Victoria,
Yeah.
this was $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 for these clients to go through to this little the estate planning attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I live in the state of Kansas. It's not California, so it might be a little different depending on where you live. But yeah, it was extremely important to do, but it cost, $8,000 to put this in place. However, I will say that this was before we joined Allworth. And now that we're with Allworth, we have a lot more tools at our, for us to use as advisors that would have brought that bill down significantly for our clients that are over $5 million
Got it.
in assets that we're managing. So that is just some of the you want to say perks
No
that
more
we have
no
for
more
high
pitch.
net worth
Well,
individuals.
thank you. Well, it is true. It is true. But all right, that's interesting, Victoria. It's right. And how hard was it to get them involved in the conversation? This is with living trusted wills. What I have found with my clients was, well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Until I've actually had them.
I actually today have a call with an estate planning attorney on my own estate on something I've been thinking the last few years. I need to address this. I need to address this. I need to address this. But I'm not dying today, right? No one's dying today. So it's the type of thing. It's so easy to put off.
Yeah. How hard was it to involve them in this conversation, the clients?
Oh, it probably took 3 years of nagging.
Isn't that funny?
That's also part of my job, right?
Yeah.
You have to make sure your clients follow through with what's in their best interest. It's like, okay, guys, we have got to get this done. And it's part of thinking through, okay, Rebecca, imagine if you die. And the way it's set up right now, everything just goes to John. And you're trusting him. And I know that you love him. He's a great guy. You're trusting him that he's just going to keep track of all your stuff and do right by you. But he has this spendthrift kid. Who knows how much he's going to have to help him out. You know, he might blow through those assets over the next 10 years. He might get remarried. You just don't know. So can we just get this buttoned up so that you know exactly what's going to happen?
I think it's important. It's important. I mean, even on first marriages, it can be important because, I mean, you've seen people do kind of crazy things when their spouse passes away.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
Suddenly they're
Absolutely.
remarried in 9 months to somebody none of the family doesn't even think it's a wise idea. And
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, I actually, I'm going through the Rolodex in my my brain right now about, like, okay, that one,
go on.
Like, he married that and lady, and I said to him, "Are you sure that you need to get this married this soon?" And
Big age gap, has her own kids, not employed.
Yes,
We've seen those things.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. And so important to know that wills are not good enough, right?
No.
That beneficiaries on assets trump wills. So regardless of what you think your will can do for you, if you've marked somebody as a beneficiary on an IRA, that trumps the will.
Again, supersedes.
Supersedes. Yes.
We don't use the word Trump.
We don't use the word Trump anymore. It's a different connotation.
Okay.
Make this apolitical.
Yeah, sorry. Supersedes.
Well,
All right.
supersede. All right. Thank
Thanks,
you very
Vicky.
much. As always, glad that you are part of the team. And Scott and I will see you in the next couple of weeks. And we've got an educational
In Fort
program
Worth.
going on in
Yeah.
Fort Worth, Texas. So
I don't think I've ever been to Fort Worth. Appreciate the call. Join us, Vicky. I've been to Dallas a number of times. And if you don't live in Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth sounds like the same thing. But you talk to people from Texas, they say they're very different cities. Don't confuse the two.
that's right.
And I don't think I've ever been to Fort Worth.
We were there and watched. There was some sort of, they ran cattle down the street for something or other. I guess they do it once or twice a week or something. It's
Not like the chasing of the bull in Spain.
Yeah, it was exactly that. That's exactly what it was.
Pass running to escape the bull. I don't think that's what happens in Fort Worth.
No.